How did you discover Bitcoin and how has it changed your life?
All right, thanks for the intro, Lar. Appreciate that. Good to be on. Um, yeah, how did I discover Bitcoin? I really wish I could remember what article I read, but it was an article I read in 2013, on probably on Wired or something like that. I'm guessing it was about Silk Road or Mount Gox or whatever one of the big stories was at the time. And it just piqued my interest. Just seemed really interesting from the technology point of view. Anyway, that's kind of what piqued my interest in it initially. I wasn't schooled in economics. I wasn't a libertarian or Austrian economist or anything like that. So that wasn't the angle that pulled me in. It was more technology. Um, but yeah, I downloaded Bitcoin Core, sync the chain, set up private key. There was no BIP39 seed phrases or anything at that time. So you were literally writing out your uppercase, lowercase, everything like in your private key. So that was really fun and exciting, and it just kind of piqued my interest from there. Kind of like dismissed it initially after a while, then came back a second time, third time, and then eventually really kind of in the I guess the 2017 frenzy was really kind of what dragged me back in to the whole like crypto, quote unquote crypto space at the time, and then kind of came out the other side of that in 2017 as a hardened Bitcoiner. So that was the that's the kind of short intro version to it.
Okay, happy days, happy days. Good. So you're in it kind of I mean quite a number of years, quite a long time. Yeah. And how have you seen the Bitcoin industry change in the past couple of years, from even from 2013 then 2017 up until now, you know?
Well, I mean, from my point of view, my background is in graphic design, UI, UX, web development design, things like that. So when I first started paying attention to Bitcoin, the UI UX side of it was pretty much non-existent. I mean, there were people working in the area, but just obviously not to the scale that it is now. It was very much just kind of, software and code heavy. Um, and really the last number of years I've seen like a flood of, front end consumer applications being built, which is really the kind of change that I've seen on that side of it from my point of view, coming at it from the design point of view, which is great to see because it's obviously something that's badly needed. Obviously it wasn't as important in the early days, but it's certainly Bitcoin has gotten to a stage now where it has more mainstream attention. There's a lot more people looking at it, trying out different ways to use it. And so, people are recognizing now that the user experience needs to be improved for a lot of different touch points for people. So that's really been a big change that I've noticed. And obviously, with my background and with Zaprite, we're kind of leading that charge as well, with what we do. But that's definitely one of the changes.
Okay. And then what about like adoption from people? What's that look like, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, again, it's what we're seeing, particularly on the Zaprite side of it, from the payment side of it, is we're seeing a lot of people approach us independently, just looking to get Bitcoin payment rails set up, which is really a change from what I noticed in the early days. Like in the early days, especially when I lived in Austin, like I moved to Austin and lived there for a few years to kind of get the business off the ground and hang around in the Bitcoin community in Austin. Um, and one of the things that I noticed is that it really was a lot of us pounding the pavement and knocking on doors and getting bars and restaurants and cafes and stuff set up on Bitcoin and really trying to sell them on the idea. And while it was fun and it worked half the time, like, you know, realistically, what used to happen is after the initial event that we held or initial kind of interest from people, it would like fade off. And the merchants, the business owners weren't really that interested in it. They were probably more interested in the extra footfall they thought they were going to get. That kind of faded out over time. And so the interest really wasn't there. Fast forward a few years, and now we're actually seeing people approach us and say, hey, look, I understand Bitcoin. I get it. I understand the store of value aspect. I understand it is the best form of saving. And so I want to accept it for my business. How do I do that? Like you guys can help. And that's really been the one of the biggest kind of changes that, I've seen and we've all seen collectively working in Zaprite is this change of mindset from business owners, from people who they run their own business. They're in control of their own businesses, small family businesses. They manage like more hands-on day-to-day aspect of the business. Um, and they're approaching us to just say like, look, we get the store of value thesis. We want Bitcoin on our treasury. We want it on our balance sheet. And we understand that the best way to do that is to accept it as payment from our customers. And so that's the kind of mindset that has shifted over, I think, in the last few years, which is great to see. And I think a lot of that has come on the back of bank failures and regulatory choke points and systemic risk within the fiat system. So I think that's kind of changing a lot of people's viewpoints, as well as just, crazy inflation and everything that's happened over the last few years, as people are starting to kind of, poke their head up and look around and start thinking of how they can actually, better manage their financial futures.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Yeah, people are starting to be more aware of what's happening around them, and especially after 2020, we've seen a lot of changes and a lot of restrictions and things like that. So people are more maybe trying to protect themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and those rails I think are, going to continue to get restricted. We can see that from governments around the world is they're really trying to just control the flow of capital as much as they possibly can. And there's got a lot of regulations. Being in the Bitcoin industry, we tend to focus a lot on the regulations that are affecting Bitcoin companies and, quote unquote crypto in general. But realistically, those regulations are coming across the standard fiat payment rails as well, sometimes even more so. So it's not something that's restricted just to the Bitcoin community and the Bitcoin ecosystem. Financial systems in general are just being controlled to such a degree that I think you're right. People are starting to wake up and realize that a little bit more.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And then regarding about Zaprite, what countries are you in? Are you in America, Europe? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so pretty much we're available globally. The only countries we're not available in is the OFAC sanctioned countries. As a US corporation, we obviously can't service OFAC sanctioned countries, so we block any signups or activity from those countries. Other than that, you just need an email address to sign up. So Zaprite's available in every other country globally. You mentioned in your intro that Zaprite is a payment processor. We tend to avoid that word because we're technically not a payment processor. At least we don't call ourselves that. We don't consider ourselves that because we don't actually touch money at all. We don't custody money. We don't touch money. All we do is provide a SaaS application to allow businesses to interact with their customers. And that's really all that we do is we facilitate that side of business for merchants, give them the merchant tools that they need. So we really don't fit into the traditional payment processor type business where you need, money transmitter licenses and that type of things. At least that's our understanding of the current regulatory framework. So, based on the back of that, we're kind of a little bit freer to operate in more countries than would otherwise be required if we required like licenses and things like that.
Okay, right. Okay, perfect. Perfect. So you're more like a bridge between uh the current system basically and to Bitcoin basically, yeah. Because I think as well from what I know, Zaprite can take fiat currency payments, Bitcoin and Lightning as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially we kind of, one of the things that we highlight with Zaprite is this one unified checkout experience. So normally, when people hear about Bitcoin, particularly like businesses and small business owners, and you're trying to sell them on the idea of taking Bitcoin, a lot of the times, at least, in years past, it always was a separate system. You would always have to set them up with BTC Pay Server or some other system that was lived outside of their existing communications flow with their customers. Whereas with Zaprite, we recognize that we're living in this dual fiat Bitcoin world, and we will be for a while. And so we need to meet customers where they are. And for us, we need to recognize that a lot of businesses, still predominantly operate on a fiat standard. At least all their accounting is done in fiat. Most of their expenses are in fiat. And so, that's really where we needed to bring the tools to them and meet them where they are. And so our tools allow you to connect any Bitcoin wallet, any Lightning node, any Lightning wallet, whether that's custodial, non-custodial, single sig, Bitcoin on chain, multi sig, collaborative custody on chain, any of that type of stuff. It's really any wallet, anywhere, anyone. And so the idea is you can connect these wallets and also connect Stripe or Square or some other card processor. And then we can build you this unified checkout where you can accept on-chain Lightning and Fiat all in this one unified experience. So you're not separating your messaging or your branding or your payment experience for your user. It's all wrapped up in one place. And then, of course, you can incentivize your customer to pay with one particular method over another, right? If you wanted to really incentivize on-chain payments because that's going straight into your cold storage through Zaprite, then you can, at a discount maybe onto the Bitcoin payment rail, or maybe at a premium on fiat payments because you don't want to have to deal with fees or exchange rates or anything that need to happen afterwards after you take that money in. So yeah, really it's about the flexibility of meeting merchants where they are, meeting business owners where they are, and then offering the flexibility to integrate Bitcoin into their existing payment flows with their customer and offering all the tools and services around that.
Yeah, yeah, sounds really good. Really, really, because that's what people, traditionally, that's what people have been afraid of, of like having all the hassle of setting up a whole new system and separating the payments and trying to tally them up at the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the month, and connecting it
Mhm.
all up with their accountants as well. That's what
Yeah,
I've seen
absolutely.
anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, traditionally with Bitcoin, like two of the big kind of hesitations around starting to accept Bitcoin, um, if you set aside the regulatory framework and the legality of it all, um, business owners tend to be concerned about accounting and taxes. They're really kind of the two biggest areas where people have this, you know, idea that it's very difficult, it's very complicated, but realistically, it's just another payment rail. So, if you're already accepting, card payments through Square or Stripe, whatever it might be, you're just adding in a Bitcoin rail alongside of that. And then Zaprite obviously gives you a full transaction history. You got a full audit logs of every payment that's come in, the timestamp, the wallet it went to, the exchange rate at the time, any fees that were paid, all of this type of stuff gets amalgamated into a transaction report that you can download a CSV, and so you have everything you need for your accountant to do your books and your accounting and stuff. And really that's kind of, we're just chipping away at those obstacles that would have been there for merchants previously. Because I think, showcasing the benefits of Bitcoin as a payment rail. And these are some of the things that we really need to focus on because, as you rightly say, they are traditionally, or at least traditionally have been, two of the biggest pain points that merchants are concerned about when thinking about adopting Bitcoin.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then let's talk a little bit about the future of money and what you see it uh, as basically, and how it's going to transition because a lot of people don't understand what's about to happen in the next couple of years. We're actually moving from an analog version of the world to a digital version of the world. A lot of people might think that might take 20 or 30 years. What's your take on it from what you're seeing in the industry? How things are going to be moving maybe faster than what most people think it's going to move regarding, say, CBDCs, new digital euro, digital dollar, the Fed now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you rightly point out that that's the way that we're headed. It seems to be increasing in pace. How long will it take? I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be 20 years. I think it'll be a lot sooner than that. With especially what we've seen the last couple of weeks in the US in particular. The DOJ has been going after Bitcoin companies like quite heavily. They've been trying to reword some of the rules and regulations that have been in place. So they're definitely kind of making moves in that direction. And I think that will only accelerate. As I mentioned before, I think the traditional fiat payment rails will get, choked considerably. Um, the powers that be, they have no desire to let go of capital controls. And those capital controls are only going to get worse as time goes on. The introduction of CBDCs accelerates that for sure. It just gives them a lot more control over, not only how people pay each other, but how they spend money in general. Um, and so, that's the future we're headed towards. I don't want to say inevitable, because there always is a possibility that we are talking about the government. At the end of the day, they tend to be bad at doing things. So um it could be a while before they get it off the ground, but it's definitely something that, obviously we all should be very concerned about, because um financial privacy is extremely important. Um, you know, it's not just for people who, maybe activists or people who are speaking out against, authoritarian or tyrannical governments, but everybody deserves financial privacy. And that's being, like, eroded away bit by bit. As I mentioned, it seems to be accelerating now. Um, and so I think something like Bitcoin is really, really important, that people start to become aware of the options that they have, not just from the payments aspect, but even just from, wealth preservation. Money printing that's just going to accelerate over the coming years and decade or two. There's no other option for central banks. They're under so much debt pressure. The only way out is to just inflate it away. Um, and so that's going to happen. So just from a, personal wealth and financial viewpoint, you have to start protecting your own future, your own financial future, and the wealth that you may have accumulated. And also just looking at ways in which you can protect yourself in the future, especially if you're a business owner. You really want to be thinking about ways um, where you can just solidify the connection to your customer to make sure that you can get paid going into the future. Um, because as these existing fiat payment rails start to get heavily regulated and choked out in future, you just might see yourself losing customers that just simply don't fall into the requirements needed to operate in these areas, right? We look at countries today that are excluded from the current financial system, um, and that could grow. That could only grow in the future. And so, what you want to be doing is thinking about adopting a system that is open globally to anybody, a permissionless, decentralized based system that you cannot be kicked out of, and that your customers cannot be kicked out of. And I think that's going to be really important as we move forward.
Yeah, yeah. And to touch on there about you're talking about financial privacy, but as well the freedom as well. Y- y-
Mhm.
You know, us here in the West and in the Americas and like in Canada, we don't know what it's like living in other countries where we're so restricted from even moving around and doing things. Yeah. We're so lucky here that we can just jump on a plane, go to an airport, jump on a plane and fly to other countries in Europe and probably all over the world. Yeah.
I mean, we
But
got
in
a
other
taste of it.
countries,
Yeah, I mean, you're right. In other countries, they live with that on a daily basis. The Western world got a taste of it, 3 or 4 years ago. So we know what governments are capable of, and we know what it's like to live that life where you can't go within 2 kilometers of your home. You got to show papers if you want to go here and there. Um, you know, that's something that people have to be very, very concerned about, because that is the governments have now shown that that is a tool in their toolbox and that they are willing to use it. Um, Now, what triggers them to use it? You know, we can't rely on the fact that um, they will be conservative with those powers because we recently seen in Canada in particular, they just basically kind of ignored the rule of law, and a judge, I think, came out not too recently and said, that the Canadian government did break the law and overstep their mark in a lot of the things that they did during those periods. So, it's just it's something that we know that the governments now are willing to do. And I think, like anything, once you've done it once, you'll be more inclined to do it again. So I think we're going to see more and more use cases where the government just feels like they can use these tools and exercise these powers. And so we may start getting unfortunately used to these things in the Western world. But you're right. Up until this point, we've been living in a maybe a false sense of security that has been exposed in the last few years. Um, and so hopefully that's kind of like, set off a light bulb in a lot of people that, all right, I need to kind of think about how I'm going to protect myself if this starts to happen on a more regular basis.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But that being said as well, I think as well, because say 95% of people out there haven't figured out what is money, and they're still doing the same thing. Like most people don't even know the cost of money in their country. Yeah. So
Mhm.
approximately in Europe, they're printing between seven and the cost of money is between 7 and 10%. In 2020, that was about 20%. In 2021, it was 20% as well. So most people are still stuck in the rat race, chasing after the same thing,
Mhm.
putting all their time and their energy into this thing, into their work. They're getting paid in this fiat currency, and they don't even know it's being debased behind their back by their policymakers.
Yeah, I
So
mean, unfortunately, that's the reality of it is none of us understand money from the early days. Like we don't get taught this stuff in school. We you know it, if you're lucky, you'll go down the Austrian economics rabbit hole early on, and you'll understand, really how a lot of this stuff works. And that's what obviously brought in a lot of early Bitcoiners and stuff, who were very aware of, the benefit that Bitcoin brings. But for most of us, yeah, you're right, we don't understand what money is. Like you said, we go to work and get paid, and we just think that like this is all normal and everything is fine, and there's ups and downs, and there's 2% inflation, and sometimes it's above that and sometimes it's below that, and that's just a normal way of things. Um, but if you take a step back and you ask yourself, like, what is money? You start to ask these questions. Okay, well, you know, money is a representation of my time and energy that I've put into whatever it is I've done for that week, whether it's working for the company or working in my own business that I own or whatever it might be. Um, you're putting time and energy into something, and you're getting this money, which is supposed to hold its value over space and time, so that you can then buy back time and energy in the future, aka retirement or anything, even buying a house or buying a car or something. You're going to buy somebody else's time and energy, or you're going to buy your own time and energy back in retirement. And if that money is losing its value every week, every month, every year, then you're constantly fighting harder and harder to try and earn enough to buy back your future. And then the more that money gets inflated away, the harder you're going to work. Um, and that's just a reality that people, they they understand it at a very superficial surface level. They understand that for some reason they have to work harder. Their savings aren't going as far as they used to. Their supermarket bill is, more than it used to be. Um, but they don't spend too much time thinking about it, and they don't understand why. And they just get told, well, 2% inflation is normal. Really sorry, but we managed to go to 8 or 9% this year. We'll try and bring it back to 10%. Don't worry, we got it under control. It's all good. Um, and unfortunately, it's a trust thing. They trust the people that are printing the money, that they're doing it for a good enough reason. And you have people like, I can't remember the guy's name. Is it Yuri Harari or whatever the guy's name is, that came out recently, or at least I think it was a recent interview, and he was
That,
talking
that,
about,
that, that the program that was made, wasn't it? Yeah.
yeah,
Recently, a
but
documentary or something like that. Some woman was interviewing him. We're gonna
well, that was
find
the
that, and we're gonna
Stephanie
slip it into
Feltman.
this. We're
Yeah, it
gonna
was the
find that
Stephanie. Well, that was the other guy who was the I think economic advisor
advisor. Economic,
for
so
yeah, but this is a different guy I'm thinking about who was basically saying that, Bitcoin is a system that's built on distrust. It's because people distrust the government and they distrust the central bankers. And his point of view was that he doesn't like it because it's a system built on distrust. And that it has been historically a good idea for society to allow central bankers to print money. Now, that is just the absolute craziest thing you could possibly say, but it flips reality on its head. The problem is you have to trust central bankers, as Satoshi himself said. You have to trust central bankers and governments not to abuse their power and print money. And unfortunately, history is rife with those examples. But the reality is you don't have to trust Bitcoin. And that's the whole purpose of Bitcoin is you remove that requirement to trust and you put your trust in math and cryptography instead of humans because humans are fallible. So it's really this idea that we're brought up to think that central bankers and governments, these people know better. They're very smart people. They've been educated in money and economics, and we should trust them when they tell us that 2% inflation is good, and we should give them the keys to the money printer, and that's fine. They'll manage it and they'll do the best because these people they're born like into sainthood, and they want to spend their whole lives making sure that they dedicate their time and energy to making sure that society is better off, and they're working for us realistically at the end of the day. I mean, that's just an absolute load of garbage and couldn't be further from the truth. But unfortunately, it's what the vast majority of people think is that these people are there to help them and their lives and make things better for them. Realistically, they're there to strip them of their assets and pocket all the money, and they can do it in the most sneaky way possible through inflation. Um, but yeah, I mean, hopefully people I think people are starting to wake up more to this because they're seeing it every day. Like I said, they're seeing it in their grocery bills. They're seeing it in the price of petrol. They're seeing it in the price of houses, in rent, and everything. It's just not sustainable, and people are realizing that there's something wrong, and then the more they can kind of become aware of that, then hopefully the more questions they'll ask, and then it will become clear to them. But Bitcoin's here. Bitcoin enables people to opt out, people who have realized the power of Bitcoin, that lifeboat is there, that escape hatch is there. Some of us have realized that sooner, and we're actually benefiting from that now. I mean, life gets cheaper every year for me. It probably does for you on a Bitcoin standard as well.
Mhm.
And for everybody else, it's getting more expensive on a fiat standard. I know which one I prefer to live under. And most people will come to that realization at some point. Unfortunately, they will go through a lot of pain along the way, but sometimes you need to touch the stove before you get burnt. And everybody will come to Bitcoin when they're ready. It's just our job to try and educate them and build the tools that they need for that time when they do actually come to that realization.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And just a little bit on that point, to elaborate a little bit about that. A lot of people as well that work with money, like people that work in the financial system. Yeah. It's
Mm.
mad. I've talked to so many people that I know in the financial system, and they just can't get their head around Bitcoin. They just overthink it. Is that why do you think that is? Yourself maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Is it maybe because they've been in that monetary system for too long and they've been
I,
stuck in that finance and everything that they've been taught
I think
for
that's it. Yeah,
30 years?
I think that's it. I think they've lived the traditional fiat world for so long that they're steeped in MMT and Keynesian economics, and whether they agree with Keynesian economics and MMT or not, they're so far down the hole in that system that Bitcoin or Austrian economics just doesn't make sense to them because they think that the existing world is the way it is and the way it should be. Sure, is there things that are like a little bit broken or need to be tweaked? Like maybe they think they're smart enough to understand that things are broken, but we can fix it within the current system. Um, but as Jeff Booth says, like you can't fix a broken system from within that same system. It's impossible. And so I think a lot of these people really struggle to see um, number one, the problem within the existing system, but also the solution, which is Bitcoin. Because if you don't understand the problem, you won't understand the solution. You won't see the solution for what it is. And for a lot of people, I think it's just simply ego. They just don't think that plebs like us were smart enough to understand it before they were. And I remember watching an interview with I think it was a Peter McCormack, what Bitcoin did. There was maybe a few interviews on with Eric Weinstein. This was a couple of years ago. And I could just sense from that interview that he was just so butthurt about the fact that he didn't understand it before like us plebs did. And it wasn't some like super high IQ intellectual solution to a problem that's plagued humanity and that only intellectuals like him could figure out. It was just simple plebs like us that figured out, oh, money broken, fix the money, fix the world. And he that really like bent his ego out of shape. And that interview was like on full display for everybody to see how that was the case with him. Um, he might argue that point, but I saw it clear as day. Like he just couldn't understand that Bitcoin, it was as simple as fix the money, fix the world. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And as well, putting the time in to learn about what is money and then learn about Bitcoin, you know?
That's a huge problem. Yeah.
People just won't put the time in. They think it's just gonna come in 2 or 3 hours, you know?
Well, this is another part of the problem is like we all are well aware of the fact that people's attention spans are diminishing at a rapidly increasing pace in today's modern world. So asking anybody to put in 1,000 hours of study into something is just like, it just isn't going to happen unless they fall down that rabbit hole and pull that thread themselves. Um, and unfortunately, most people's understanding of Bitcoin is going to be superficial. That's just the nature of it. It's the nature of anything like complex, really, especially when something like Bitcoin touches on so many different aspects of everything from, economics to game theory to, you name it, like Bitcoin touches it. Um, and that's just not something that you're gonna learn from a cursory glance. So you really do have to put in the time, and people don't want to put in the time to anything these days, right? They don't want to put in the time to cook a dinner. They just want to tap a few buttons on their app and order a takeout, right? It's the nature of humanity. We're getting lazy, not just in a physical sense, but in an intellectual sense as well. And so something like Bitcoin is, sometimes the cursory, superficial stance is what most people are happy taking because it conforms to what everybody else is saying, and so you feel good thinking that you know about this thing because your opinion matches everybody else's. Um, and that's yeah, I mean that's hard. There's not a lot of people who are going to put in the effort to and the proof of work to study not just Bitcoin, but like history and economics and everything that's happened, particularly in the last like 53 years since we came off the gold standard. Just looking at how that has unraveled society and all the effects that have happened from that. That's just a massive rabbit hole that like most people they aren't even aware of it. Even if they were aware of it, it takes time and dedication to actually go through and spend the hours studying it. But most people just aren't even aware of that. I mean, particularly
Yeah.
now since 1971, like I would say most people alive today, it's the only system they've known. Even if you're 70 years of age, chances of you being a teenager or a 19-year-old and 17-year-old and knowing about this stuff is pretty slim. So it is the only system that you've known. But most people, as humans, we have difficulty thinking outside of timescales beyond our own lifespan. And when you try and convince people that the last 53 years have been a catastrophic social experiment, that they just don't seem to understand that, because what you're telling them is their whole life has been an experiment. And that's, from a obviously from a monetary financial aspect. um and that's scary for people, like, to try and tell them that, well, hang on, we had thousands of years of hard money under gold, and then we've really had 53 years of an absolute mess and a shit show of like printing money and living well beyond our means and living on debt. And that's something that people just can't wrap their heads around. Like I said, they just think this is the way it's always been. And like, sure, maybe there's problems with it. Maybe we've had inflation, but thank God for Christine Lagarde and the ECB, who are going to like tame inflation and bring it back under control, because they have our best interests at heart. I mean, this is unfortunately the mindset of a lot of people, and it takes a lot of time and effort to study really a lot of things before you even understand that Bitcoin is the solution. You need to understand the problem first.
Yeah, yeah, understand the problem and then find a solution then to fix that problem. Yeah, and the
Yeah,
problem is the money. The problem is the money, and just most people just don't get it, you know?
well, this is
And
it. If you don't understand that the money is broken, then you will never understand Bitcoin. You simply will not understand Bitcoin if you don't understand the money is broken. And unfortunately, at least from what I get talking to my friends, like if I go out for pints on the weekend and I talk to my friends, none of them understand this. Like I try and tell them the money is broken, and they kind of just sneer at me as if like, I don't know what I'm talking about, or I watch some crazy YouTube video with my tinfoil hat on. And unfortunately, that's, any kind of any kind of non-conformist viewpoints are kind of viewed with derision. And it's like, you you have to get past that, and you have to try and like convince people of the problem first before they can even attempt to see the solution for what it is.
yeah, yeah. And even regarding something has been happening now recently in the last couple of days in Cuba. I don't know if you've heard about it, but there's big problems over there with the central bank in Cuba. Yeah, a lot of people can't get their money out. It's not on mainstream media, nothing on the papers, nothing out there, you know. But they're finding it very, very difficult over there. Uh, in Cuba at the moment. Have you heard anything about it yourself?
I've seen just a couple of headlines and photos on Twitter as I was scrolling through yesterday, I think it was. I yeah, basically what you said is all I've heard, is that problems with, central bank, and people can't get their money and it's gone, and there's been bank runs and there's been riots on the street, and I've seen, kind of chaos over there. But that's about the extent of what I know. But doesn't surprise me. There's many countries have gone through that in the past few years and decades, and many more will. I mean, every country will in the future, including
Hmm.
um, you know, all European countries and Western countries in the United States. It's I mean, just look at what's happening now. I mean, people are rioting any chance they get, because they're fed up. Like they're just fed up. Life is difficult. It's expensive. It's crazy. They don't see any hope for the future. And so, if you're trying to get by any way you can, and your government keeps inflating away your savings, and all of a sudden you go to the bank and they tell you, sorry, all your savings are gone. Um, what do you think is going to happen? Like that's just going to upend society. And unfortunately, every single central bank in the world is completely flat out broke. They just don't have money. I mean, you look at the level of derivatives to the level of assets in the world. It's something like 4 or 5x. It's levered up 4 or 5x, all the derivatives to assets. I mean, that's just, that'll tell you everything you need to know. The world, as we know it, is 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 made up of non-existent economic activity. And that's just all going to come crashing down at some point. We've been on a one-way street since 1971. There is only one conclusion. There is no other outcome. Invent um, you cannot invent the economic output to fill the gaps. I mean, you can try. If we made the right decisions, we could slowly unwind some of the debt, maybe, if we went on to some kind of a hard money standard and stopped printing money and started improving economic output, we could slowly start to make a dent and maybe reverse things. I don't think so. I don't know, but like, you know, I think at this stage, it's quite clear that the way things have gone, there is only one conclusion. Um,
Yeah,
and
we're in
and
a debt spiral at the moment, and from what I can see, there's no turning back this spiral. It's out of control.
there is no turning back. I think United States is 37 trillion or whatever it is in debt. EU
Yeah.
of debt. Nobody wants to default on their debt because they realize that that's end game. Um, so what do? Well, you have to just continue to start wars around the world to wash the money printing and the QE that you've done to try and inflate the debt away. At some point, that's just not going to be sustainable. And so the ultimate end goal, unfortunately, of those in power is to destroy the economies and just literally raise them to the ground and then rebuild with CBDCs. That's it.
Mhm.
That's the only thing that can possibly happen. They all know it. We all know it. And unfortunately, it's you know, trying to avoid that from our side, but
How to
realizing
protect yourself from it. And that was
how
like
to
one of
protect
my next
ourselves from
questions.
it.
So yeah, so what can you see that's coming, and how do people like you and me, yeah, protect our families from what is coming?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is Bitcoin. The obvious only way to do that is you want to protect your wealth going into the future. Um, you cannot do that through saving money. You know, as I mentioned before, money is the time and energy that you've put into work. You're saving that for the future. We know that it's being debased at a rapid rate, so simply saving money has been impossible for a long time, which is why people have flooded into real estate and art and like fine wine and all this kind of stuff for some way to kind of hold the value of their savings to try and beat inflation and outpace government shenanigans. And that has worked for a few decades, but at some point the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath them. And all these people who have money stored in real estate and stocks and bonds and derivatives will get wiped out because the value just simply isn't there. It's all inflated. And what we're going to see is Bitcoin step in and start to like soak up a lot of that monetary premium that's been added to a lot of these assets where it shouldn't be. Um, and so Bitcoin will start to, soak up market cap from gold, from real estate, from other places. And so really that's where you want your savings to be. You want your savings to be in the best store of value, the hardest asset there is, and Bitcoin has proven to be that over the last 15 years. Um, so what I'd say is if you want to protect your family wealth, if you've got it, or if you haven't, at least try and build wealth over the coming like decade or two. There really is just no other option. You literally have to have an exposure to Bitcoin. Now, you can decide whether that's 1 to 5% or anywhere up to 100%. But that's on you. The more conviction you have, the higher that percentage will be. But I mean, if you're a traditional investor, there's a lot of things you can do to kind of put your mind at ease. And there's a lot of research and study you can do that will kind of back up what we've all known as Bitcoiners for a long time is that Bitcoin is a rock solid store of value. Um, and it's just a case of realizing, as I said, going back to the previous point we were talking about, realizing the problem and then you'll be able to see the solution. If the problem is your wealth and your savings is being inflated away, the solution is to put your wealth and savings in something that can't be inflated away, and that's Bitcoin. And so, really, you know, really, that's the only solution to people going forward. Like you can't. you can't say to yourself like, okay, well, I'm gonna like, diversify and buy maybe like, rental real estate or commercial real estate, and then I'm gonna buy stocks and bonds, and I'm gonna put some in gold. And gold is probably, we've seen it rally a little bit recently, but ultimately, who knows what will happen there, because that's just, that's just completely captured by authorities at this stage. And we need to realize that Bitcoin is one of the only kind of last hopes that we have left.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
and
that, that's a powerful tool to retain your wealth.
yeah, even with gold though as well, and even real estate, yeah. When you look at the maths and you look at how much the value is, it's growing every year, year on year. Like real estate is going up approximately 8 to 10% per year.
Mm,
Okay, so if the cost of money is 7 to 10% per year, you're actually drowning.
mm.
And gold is going up maybe 5 to 7%, some years 3.5% a year. You're at nothing. You're drowning again. So you need
Yeah.
something that's really going up 20% a year minimum, year on year, every year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, most people are probably living their life in deficit, and they just don't realize it. For example, I mean, if you look at the last 3 or 4 years, now you could argue that it was an anomaly with COVID and lockdowns and all that kind of stuff, right? But we've probably had, I don't know what the number is, but like we've probably had at least 20 to 30% inflation since 2020. Now that's probably just official numbers, right? Like real
Yeah.
real numbers are probably even higher, but like you're gonna say at least 20 to 20, let's call it 25% of
Yeah.
of
But
reported cumulative inflation.
the truth be known though, it's closer to 50%.
But yeah, so even if you take a conservative viewpoint and say, okay, let's say 25%, how many people do you think working in Ireland today have had a 25% pay rise since 2020? I
Yeah.
guarantee you like zero,
Yeah.
right? If you take the regular workforce, right? Excluding like
Yeah.
CEOs and bank CEOs and
0.001% probably.
yeah,
0.001 of a
right.
percent. I probably
So
got that type of an increase.
So realistically, what that means is the vast majority of people in Ireland in the workforce today have probably had a 20% pay cut, and they don't realize it. They're not thinking about it in those terms. Um, and that's like, that's just horrific. That's horrific. And we've seen how people are struggling. Like people can't pay bills, rents, mortgages, like everything is just, it's crazy. Um, Everything from like home energy bills to groceries. I mean, we saw it everywhere, like globally, but like in Ireland, it was people were hit particularly hard. Um, and there's got to be a lot of people struggling. And the horrible thing, one of the horrible things about inflation is it never goes backwards. Like it's not like when you get like, 4, 5, 8, 10% inflation like one year, you can't just shrug it off and say, oh, well, that was just an anomaly. We're back to 2% now. You're still higher. Like it's not like you've reversed it. Like you're still higher. Those prices aren't going down. And your paycheck did not go up 10% that year. So, most people, unfortunately, have been living their lives in deficit for a long time. And not just because of, regular inflation, like money printing, but it's also through other things. Like if you think of like tax brackets, right? Now, the government every year, like in Ireland, for example, you can earn like last year it was 40,000, this year it's 42,000. You can earn in the lower 20% tax bracket before you go into the higher tax bracket. Um, if that's not outpacing inflation, then you're losing every year because you're just like if especially if you do end up getting a pay rise, you're bumped into a higher tax bracket because your tax brackets are not keeping up with inflation. So your pay rise is wiped out by extra taxes because your tax bracket is not being increased. So your tax rise that you think you're getting paid more has now bumped you into a higher tax bracket, which means you're paying more tax on it and you're getting hit with inflation at the same time. Um, there's so many little sneaky things like this that people just don't think about that are constantly eroding away at their ability to even put money by every month. And then when they do have the opportunity to put money by every month, they're still putting it into things that they think they should be putting it into, like real estate and other things. Um, and unfortunately, that's gonna it's gonna cripple a lot of people in the coming 5 to 10 years. So going back to your original question, how do you protect your wealth going forward? You need to realize the problem, and you need to realize that Bitcoin is the solution.
Yeah, definitely. And then put in the work to learn about it and educate yourself, and even trying to get, I'm kind of blessed, in fairness. My partner, she understands this. In 2020, when our
Mhm.
main business was shut down by the government, uh, we done like event management for a long, long time, 27 years. And just like that, with the click of their fingers, they closed it down for 18 months.
Mhm.
We took the time to learn and
Yeah,
learn. And when we were stuck inside, we were watching, we were educating ourselves. And I'm lucky that she's on board with what we're doing and she understands what's going on.
yeah.
So, people need to get their families involved in this and start educating their families and their partners. And if you can do that, you're going to be some strong people, you
Oh
know?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the most important things, regardless of Bitcoin, is that, if you're married, that your partner is 100% on board with you and what you're doing. It should be an absolutely open, collaborative experience. And so, having both of you go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole at the same time is just makes that process like a hell of a lot easier. Um, you know, we've all seen people joke online about how they're buying Bitcoin and their wives or whatever are giving out to them. Um,
Mm.
and
But
it's a
sometimes it's not a
joke,
joke. It's
it,
not a joke sometimes.
but this is the thing. It's like, sometimes it's a joke, sometimes it's not a joke. But if your partner also um sees the problem as well, then that just makes it so much easier for you to move as a family a lot quicker and protect yourselves a lot quicker. Um, you really don't want to be trying to convince your significant other that, this is the right thing to do. Um, they should hopefully be on board and doing the work as well alongside you, and so that it's a very much like a collaborative decision, because moving quickly together as a family unit is imperative.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. It's all about as I say as well. It's for the kids as well, and for the family. That's what Bitcoin's about, you know.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, all of this money printing and constantly running up debt by the government and the state is just stealing from your kids and your grandkids. Like, you're stealing from future generations. I know the Stephanie Keltons and the MMTers like to say it's just money we owe ourselves. So what's the big problem? The problem is you're stealing from our kids and our grandkids, and like, that's just disgusting, and we got to fix that.
yeah, yeah. And hopefully more people will come on the journey that we've discovered a few years ago, because it's only starting, as Michael Saylor says, since January 10th, the gold rush has started, you know. A lot
Yeah.
of people, we were just in there before that. Yeah, yeah. And
Hmm.
it is only starting. And we can see now with the institutions coming on board, the ETFs launched in America since January 10th. A week and a half ago, Hong Kong launched the ETFs as well. And Bitcoin is the future. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely the future, and I think even the governments and the nefarious powers that be realize that too.
Mm.
And I think they're just trying their best to capture it through regulation. And the longer we give them the opportunity to do that, the more successful they'll be. Um, I'm very much a fan of using Bitcoin as payments. And, you know, like just simply hodling and saving in Bitcoin is using Bitcoin. It's just not using it fully. And so I would love to see, obviously, I'm biased because this is what my business like helps people to do, but I would love to see more people using it as a medium of exchange. And I think it will become crucial in the future because, if we're all saving Bitcoin and we all have massive hordes of Bitcoin and, we don't use it enough, then the rails and the economies won't be in place when we need them to be. Um, and that's really kind of like one of my fears is that we just don't build enough quickly enough. Um, and there's a lot of things that need to be worked on in Bitcoin, especially in terms of like, the code base and security and everything else. And obviously scaling and layer twos and everything. But I just think spending Bitcoin is spending and receiving Bitcoin for goods and services is crucially important as we, kind of step through the next, 5 to 10 years. We really, really need to have those systems in place where people are realizing that it is a better medium of exchange because their existing fiat systems are inherently risky. And Bitcoin offers a better solution, not just because of all the things we love, like, cheap instant settlement, no chargebacks, all of these things. Um, couple that with store of value as well. It just makes absolute sense for businesses to be starting to accept Bitcoin and have it on their treasury and their balance sheet. It just provides for a healthy business in the long run. And then that, of course, can be mirrored in families. To answer your previous question, is just think of your family like a business. You need to have Bitcoin on the balance sheet to be able to support yourself going forward. And that's really what it's all about. And we need to facilitate the exchange of Bitcoin between merchants and consumers as we do that over the next few years, and that's crucially important.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's great that you're going to be there at the Bitcoin Ireland event as well. We're going to be showing people how to take payments with Bitcoin, how they can invoice people, uh,
Hmm.
and then those people can have a choice of paying between fiat currency, Bitcoin, or Lightning payments. So that'll be great. Yeah. So just to wrap it up there, what's happening with Zaprite over the next couple of years, or where do you see
Yeah,
yourselves going?
so we're obviously just in build out mode where we're just building out features and plugins and expanding on the plugins and connections that we already have. Listening to user feedback, adding different connections, adding different tools and different features to really kind of just make the product as robust as possible. Like I said before, we're seeing a lot of merchants and independent business owners reach out to us to independently to ask us about a Bitcoin payment strategy, which I'm really excited about because it seems to indicate a shift in sentiment. Whereas it's no longer just Bitcoin companies trying to like promote and push Bitcoin payments. We're actually seeing it from the wider community, especially the business community, that they're realizing this is what they need. So that's something that's really exciting that we're seeing within Zaprite. And so we're obviously going to continue to work with those businesses, onboarding them and doing a lot of sales calls and things like that, getting them onboarded and talking them through different approaches. Um, and so yeah, that's really the focus for us at Zaprite at this point in time is onboarding as many users as we can as quickly as we can, while expanding the feature set and connections and plugins available so that we can really meet consumers, businesses where they are, and integrate into their existing systems. So we don't need to get them set up on any kind of a different wallet. We're not going to ask them to KYC at any brand new wallet wherever they already are, where their preferred method for storing or buying Bitcoin is, we'll just hook that in and allow them to take payments directly into that for their business. And that's really what we're focused on.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, uh, give us your
Yeah,
details. Yeah, how do you get
yeah.
in touch with
So, I
yourselves?
mean, The company is just zaprite.com, zaprite.com. I'm John, JOHN _ Zaprite on Twitter. And the company is at Zaprite app on Twitter. So yeah, DM us, reach out to us, hit up our contact form on the website if you're a business that wants to get in touch and get an onboarding call and schedule a demo. And if you're in Ireland and you're going to the conference on the 25th of May, then definitely come get a ticket, come check us out, talk to us. I'll be doing a short presentation on Bitcoin payments and how businesses can adopt Bitcoin. And obviously I'll be there to take questions and talk to people before and after. And there'll be a whole host of other amazing Bitcoin companies and speakers. So if you're starting to go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and you have questions, then the Bitcoin Ireland conference on the 25th of May is going to be the place you need to be to get a lot of those questions answered.
Okay, thanks a lot, John. And we will talk soon again. Yeah, maybe you'll come back on in a couple of months and we'll see how you have been developing and how things have been moving with Zaprite and Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to come back on. So appreciate you having me this time. It's been a great chat, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.